Hey guys, what's up? So, it's been a while since I've last posted, and that's mainly because I'm still recovering from bottom surgery, or at least I was for the past 3 months or so, on top of sort of going to college and going back to work. But I do want to give an update on how things are going, on complications, on wound separation, all that fun stuff. Now, as a quick disclaimer, this video is going to involve the use of anatomical terms. In some instances, I may include like medical diagrams, I may include drawings of what things look like, and so if those things sort of make you uncomfortable, I would not recommend continuing with this video. That being said, I will be sure to include content warnings or trigger warnings before any sort of anatomical diagrams come up so that you can skip ahead if you'd like. So as a quick recap, I had abdominal phalloplasty using a DIEP flap. Back in December, I had stage 2, which was the creation stage. That is the creation of the phallus, something that in this moment is not quite functional. Function doesn't really get added until later stages. And so I'm just going to start off with my top half and sort of go down. So I guess starting off with the abdomen. So the recovery for abdominal phalloplasty, I guess it was very similar to a tummy tuck. Definitely in the sense that I had to be pretty hunched over for the first month or so. I did end up going back to school full time. I want to say 4 to 5 weeks after surgery. I was actually cleared to go back at 3 weeks as long as I felt okay. So that's just to say that the hunching went from 45 degrees to 90 degrees over the course of probably 3 weeks, but I felt ready to go back maybe around 4 weeks. Now the abdominal incisions, those are all closed up. They're healing fine. I'm using some silicone scar gel to sort of help with the healing. Although, to be honest, I'm very inconsistent with it, so I'm not sure if it's really actually doing much. In terms of nerves, I recently had my nerves begin waking up maybe a couple weeks ago, and I sort of initially noticed this as like an achy, like maybe pressure related feeling. But I would wake up feeling just sort of awful. And over the course of like a week or so, that shifted from a more achy feeling to more of a like burning or buzzing, tingling sort of feeling. I remember this one day in particular, I was working out at like 4 a.m. in the morning, and there was this like fiery sensation that just sort of came out of nowhere. And it was so bad that I ended up calling my hospital's like 24/7 hotline. And so that's been going on. I would say that the nerve pain is like on a scale of 1 to 10, it's at a baseline 5 every day. And then there are maybe specific instances throughout the day in which it'll like spike up to maybe an 8 or a 9. So, as an example, something that involves like physical activity that could make it spike. So, standing, walking, exercising, bending down, because you know the bending, you're bending your abdomen. Those will sort of lead to a spike in terms of nerve pain. I feel like it's been getting a little better recently, but it is still bad enough that I'm kind of considering asking my surgeon for like a medication for nerve pain. We'll see how that goes when I do, I guess. Now, in terms of other sensation, I drew up some models of what sensation looks like now versus what it looked like 1 month post surgery. So, as you can see, pressure related sensation that's been fairly stable. It's coming up maybe halfway up the phallus. In terms of tactile sensation, that's slowly been coming back. I have maybe an inch or so all around. Pain related sensation, maybe a little less than tactile. That's something that's really only noticeable because I've sort of had to begin plugging out hair. I actually don't think I had enough laser hair removal. And so I do have to maintain my hair down there. And I've noticed that, when plucking, I can feel pain a little bit just around the base. Now, temperature sensation, I don't have any so far, at least from what I can tell when I'm showering. Okay, so on to complications. Wound separation was by far the biggest complication that I had. Actually, I think it was probably the only complication that I ended up having. But unfortunately, it was one that was significant enough that it took up maybe 3 months to heal. So basically, what happened was my surgeon used a skin graft. The tension, I guess, was a little too much, and that skin graft actually ended up sort of pulling apart, right? It didn't really take. And that led to wound separation. Now, that wound separation took 3 months to heal. It's doing fine now. But the issue is that when that skin graft was sort of pulling things apart, it also pulled apart the urethra a bit. And so the urethra ended up, when it healed, it ended up migrating to the outside. Now, I know that sounds a bit confusing, so I've drawn up some diagrams on what that looks like. The urethra, it's a tube, right? When the surgery was done, it was a tube within the phallus, tube within a tube phalloplasty. Now, the skin graft was over the urethra, and as the skin graft was sort of pulling things apart, the urethra split, right? So if we can imagine the urethra as a tube, as a cylinder, when you split a cylinder in half, it becomes a rectangle, right? And so when the urethra was healing, it healed in that rectangular sort of manner, except it no longer healed on the inside, it healed onto the outside, right? And so that has to be addressed in a later stage. My surgeon's basically going to go in and sort of retubularize the urethra. To help with that, he's told me to sort of tape the catheter to myself for the next 3 months. And again, that might seem confusing because usually a catheter is supposed to go on, like, in the inside of you, right? Basically, what he wants me to do is tape the catheter onto the urethral skin, and he wants me to sort of like press down on it with enough force that the urethral skin is going to wrap around the catheter. And the idea there is that we're just sort of stretching out the skin. I guess maybe that'll make it easier for the two sides of the scar to be stitched together to retubularize the urethra in the future stage. In terms of scarring itself, I feel like my scars are pretty dark. I have been prescribed Montelukast to sort of help with the scarring. In terms of measurements, so far I'm around 6 inches in girth, around 6 to 6.5 in length, depending on how swollen things are that day. And then lastly, in terms of positioning, unfortunately my positioning is super duper high. I guess maybe this is just a drawback of abdominal phalloplasty, a drawback of my anatomy to an extent, but things are maybe about as high as like the waistband of my underwear, right? Pretty high, so it's gonna need to be lowered in future surgery. Probably a solid 2 inches just to get it closer to like the metasite. The positioning, I'm not really vibing with it because, to be honest, it's been sort of significantly impacting my life. So, for instance, it makes it a lot harder to hide things because, things are so high up. On top of that, when you put on certain clothing, it puts pressure on things, right? So if things are as high as like the waistband of your underwear, then the waistband of your jeans is obviously going to put pressure on like the phalloplasty. Then there's also sort of issues with like the weight when dangling, so the weight just feels like it's in the wrong place because, I mean, anatomically it is in the wrong place. There's sort of issues with friction that's been a bit frustrating, and so I'm really hoping that I can get things lowered. Maybe, I don't know, I was gonna say a couple months. A couple months is not a realistic expectation. Probably a year from now. So in terms of future staging, I've got top surgery coming up exactly a month from now. I am hoping that stage 3 is going to be the retubularization of the urethra. I always have a lot of difficulty saying that word. So they're going to recreate the urethra in that stage. Maybe I'll try asking my surgeon for like implants during the same stage, but I'm not sure if that's possible. Stage 4 is probably going to be the urethral hookup, the glansplasty, testicular implants if I can't get it done in stage 3, and then probably, hopefully, lowering of the phalloplasty if they're able to do it during that stage. And then the very last stage, of course, would be an ED device. Now, in terms of feeling, I guess I feel a bit neutral about the phalloplasty. Sometimes I feel very euphoric, sometimes I feel super duper dysphoric. Things are kind of strange. I feel like a sculpture whose body hasn't yet been molded, right? Like anatomically, things are kind of off. I guess in terms of the length, that's also something that's sort of made me feel a bit dysphoric as well. And the reason why is because, I mean, I'm around 6.5 inches, but a phalloplasty is always going to be the same length, and most cis men aren't 6 inches flaccid, right? And so that's been something that I've been grappling with a bit, especially because I sort of went in hoping for 4 to 5 inches. 4 to 5 inches would probably have been my ideal. Like my pack area was 3.75 inches, and I was very satisfied with that, especially because I'm a pretty short guy, right? I'm only 5'2". I don't need something massive. But those are all things that can be addressed in future surgery. So, the positioning, the shortening of, a phalloplasty, that could be done in a later stage. Now, in terms of ease of recovery, in terms of the proportions, the aesthetics, I feel like things look good so far. I have been having a bit of an issue where as things heal, they have sort of been like curving in one way, and so I might ask my surgeon if there would be like a revision that's possible to sort of correct that. But I mean, yeah, overall things are going well. So now things sort of become about speedrunning my transition because once I graduate college, I'm not sure what's going to happen with insurance. It may be 10 years before I'm able to get the rest of my surgeries as far as I'm aware. I hope these videos are helping. I hope documenting all this helps anyone that is considering DIEP Phallo. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. And yeah, that's it. Take care.